I could hear a lot of noise outside, like people were trying to get in to catch me. I was so scared that I woke up. When Lei heard Joe's dream, he felt his scalp tingle and the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He had never told anyone about his own nightmares, and Joe had no idea what he had been going through. But why had she had the same dream, especially since it seemed to be progressing from where his nightmares had left off? Lei was genuinely terrified. It felt like the calm he had experienced was just a false sense of security. The fact that both he and Joe had the same nightmare without ever discussing it was too eerie to be a coincidence. He felt the blood drain from his face and couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was at play. He knew he couldn't keep this from Joe any longer. He had to tell her everything. The nightmares he had been having since they got back from Japan, the strange footsteps he heard at night, and the eerie woman he had seen. He told her everything, hoping that together they could figure out what was happening. When Joe heard his story, she was stunned. She realized that this was beyond their control and that they needed help. They decided to tell their families and seek the help of someone knowledgeable in these matters. The next day, Lei went home and told his mother everything. As we mentioned, Lei's family is involved in a large-scale import-export business. In Guangdong, families with big businesses often have a close relationship with a master. Not a school teacher, but someone who helps with feng shui, exorcisms, and choosing auspicious dates. It's kind of like having a consultant. Lei's family has known such a master for many years, and he's known to be quite skilled. Lei's mother immediately contacted this master, and they arranged for him to visit Lei and Joe's home that very afternoon to take a look at the situation. That afternoon, Lei's family waited anxiously in the house. While they waited, Lei recounted everything that had happened to him over the past few weeks to his family. The master arrived. He didn't look particularly remarkable, but their parents and elders held him in high regard. He was known for his abilities. Without saying much, the master went upstairs and began by asking Lei and Joe some questions. Then he walked around the room examining everything. The family, though unsure of what he was doing, followed him respectfully. After a while, he looked very serious and told Lei's mother that they should talk outside. Once they were in the stairwell, the master said very gravely, "To be honest, I can't handle this situation." This shocked Lei's mother. Their family had worked with this master for a long time, and he had always been successful. This was the first time he admitted he couldn't deal with something. "Master, what's going on? Is it that serious?" she asked anxiously. The master explained, "When your son moved into this house, I was the one who checked the feng shui and suggested where to place certain furniture and decorations. I even recommended putting some potted plants in certain spots to protect the home and ensure good fortune. But when I looked at those plants just now, they were in terrible condition, dry, cold soil, and the roots were probably rotten. This means that the protective energy of the house has been completely overwhelmed by negative energy. The house itself is now a place of bad energy, more like a tomb than a home. It's not suitable for living." He continued, "I've been in this house for a few minutes, and I couldn't find any sign of life or positive energy. It's as if something is living here, and it's draining the life force from the home. But the strangest part is that I couldn't find where this thing is hiding. In all my years of dealing with these kinds of situations, I've never encountered anything like this. It seems that even with my abilities, I can't find or deal with it." Lei's mother was frantic. "Master, what should we do? What is this thing and why has it happened?" The master turned to Lei and asked, "Think very carefully. Besides the strange dreams and what you've told me, is there anything else you haven't mentioned? Did you bring anything unusual back with you?" Lei thought hard but shook her head. "No, I don't think so." The master insisted. "That doesn't make sense. Based on what you've told me, it seems like you brought something back that you shouldn't have, and that's why this thing has followed you." Lei's mother kept urging him to think harder. Then Joe, who had been biting her lip nervously, spoke up hesitantly. "What about the comb?" Lei's eyes widened in surprise. He had been about to ask about it. The master looked at Joe and asked her to explain. Joe was scared but managed to say, "When we were staying at that guest house in Fuji-Kawaguchiko, Lei found a comb in the room. I thought it was pretty, so when he went downstairs to check out, I took it without telling him. I was afraid he would be mad. But when we got back to China, I noticed the comb had faded and cracked. It looked really old, so I threw it away with the trash. I didn't think anything of it until you kept asking if we brought anything back. Lei stared at her in disbelief. You took that thing? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you touch it? Joe was on the verge of tears. I didn't mean to. I just thought it was pretty. I didn't think it would cause any problems. The master quickly intervened. Where did you throw the comb away? Joe, still crying, said I threw it in the trash downstairs a few days ago. The master sighed deeply. This is very bad. That thing was probably attached to the comb, and you shouldn't have brought it back. It should have stayed with the comb. But now that the comb is gone, it's still here in this house. I've searched the entire house, and I can't find where it's hiding. Unless, he glanced at Lei and Joe, unless it has attached itself to one of you. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. The master took out 2 talismans from his bag, performed a quick ritual, and placed them on Lei's and Joe's arms. They were too shocked to say anything and just let him do it. After a few minutes, the master took the talismans off and examined them carefully in the light from the window. He shook his head. Strange, there's no sign that either of you has been possessed. That's really odd. The family breathed a sigh of relief. If neither Lei nor Joe had been possessed, then maybe everything would be okay. Lei's mother approached the master, her voice trembling with hope. So is everything going to be okay? If it comes down to it, we can just abandon this house and move somewhere else. It's not a big deal. We can start over. The master turned to face her, his brow furrowed and eyes fixed intently on Lei and Joe. The 2 of them had just breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing that they hadn't been possessed. But the master's next words sent their hearts plummeting. The situation is far more complicated than that, he said gravely. If it were just a matter of possession, we could find ways to exorcise the entity. Even if we couldn't pinpoint who was possessed, we could treat both of them. In the worst case scenario, the one who was possessed might fall seriously ill, but with time and care they could recover. But this, I can't handle it. You might find someone else who can. But even then, it's not that simple. They might have encountered a life-buying ghost. At the mention of a life-buying ghost, the entire family was thrown into a state of sheer terror. What is a life-buying ghost? Can you still live if your life is sold? Lei's mother asked, her voice shaking. The master explained. A life-buying ghost is a term used to describe an entity that offers material help in exchange for a person's lifespan. This kind of transaction goes unpunished by the natural order and can't be undone. It's like making a purchase. Once the deal is done, there are no refunds or exchanges. What's more, these transactions happen in secret. For example, imagine you're walking down the street and you find $100. You look around, see no one, and pocket it. If that money was left, there is bait by a life-buying ghost. The moment you take it, the transaction is complete. And knowingly, you've sold a part of your lifespan to the ghost, and you're none the wiser, he continued. Lei and Joe's situation is similar. By taking that comb, they unknowingly made a deal with a life-buying ghost. The worst part is that the comb has already been thrown away, so there's no way to reverse the transaction. After delivering this chilling explanation, the master made to leave. Lei's mother tried to stop him, but he was firm in his refusal. Before he left, he offered one last piece of advice. There's only one way this might be resolved, though I can't guarantee anything. You need to go back to Japan, find that guest house, and seek out someone who can communicate with spirits. They need to negotiate with the entity that was attached to the comb. Whether you can find such a person or reach an agreement is beyond my knowledge. Even if you do manage to talk, the terms will likely be extremely harsh, and the price you'd have to pay could be morally compromising. I've done all I can. With that, the master turned and left, leaving the family in a state of despair. After the master's departure, Lei's mother, Joe's family, and the couple themselves went to Japan, determined to find a solution. They spent a considerable amount of time there, eventually locating the guest house and a well-known local monk. The monk attempted a ritual to communicate with the spirit, but during the process, both Lei and Joe fell into a deep coma. Frightened, their families rushed them to the hospital. Though no physical abnormalities were detected, Lei soon began to show signs of severe physical decline. After a period of hospitalization with no improvement, his family decided to bring him back to China for treatment. Despite further medical care, Lei succumbed to organ failure and passed away from multiple organ failure. Zhou, though her life was saved, was left extremely frail and bedridden, likely to spend the rest of her life in poor health. In the end, the two families, who had been on the verge of becoming in-laws, were left devastated by this unforeseen tragedy. They drifted apart, their once promising union shattered by forces beyond their control. What had started as a seemingly harmless act, taking a pretty comb, had spiraled into a catastrophe that no one could have imagined.